Are you an evidence-based manager? Do you base all your management decisions on clear evidence? It's interesting, this question looks at the future and says, are you going to be an evidence-based manager? It assumes that you aren't already. Now, why would that be so? Most managers would base their decision making on clear evidence if they could, but when it comes to people management, when it comes to HR strategy, it's very difficult to collect any clear evidence to say which way you should go. So we're going to look at some suggestions and ideas of how you can move towards being more of an evidence-based manager in future. This picture is taken from the front cover of a scheme called the 100 Best Companies to Work For, which is run in conjunction with the Sunday Times newspaper in the UK. Now, if you just stop and look at this picture for a second or two, having a vague idea that the people in this magazine are all going to be organisations that want to be a best company to work for, and think what sort of subliminal message they're trying to send from this young girl with a pink feather boa and a big smiling face. And the words in pink say, is your company in the pink? Is the company doing well? There's meant to be a very clear message here. Having fun at work, having engaged employees, happy employees, somehow is good for business. Now, the evidence-based manager would ask the question, where is the evidence that makes this connection? How do I know that having happy smiling faces will mean that I'm running a very successful business? Perhaps we need to look at this in a bit more detail. The question the evidence-based manager always needs to ask themselves is, have I got evidence that shows a causal connection between what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to achieve? Correlations are not good enough. And if we get these two ideas confused, it can cause all sorts of management problems, particularly in the people management sphere. Here we have a quote from an online discussion site for people who work in training and development, Training Zone, based in the UK. And somebody wrote in to point out that there's plenty of evidence to show that effective people development is linked to organisational success. And they say the figures are certainly out there if you're prepared to look, investigate carefully, and increasing numbers of studies now showing the impact of effective people development on organisations' success. And then he goes on to quote some latest research from Cranfield School of Management, which apparently shows that 85% of successful organisations invest at least 2% of their budget in developing staff, as compared to only 60% of less successful organisations. Now, you might like to ask yourself the question, what exactly are these statistics being quoted here? And what is this person actually suggesting? And do the statistics as they're presented actually back up what this person is suggesting about the connection between people development and organisational success? It's probably a good idea for any evidence-based manager to start from a healthily sceptical viewpoint on any statistics they are presented with. There are basically two ways of looking at this question of causation. Let's look at them. If you're running a business and you want to try and manage the people as well as you can, there's basically two ways to look at this. One is to say, well, if I have the right business results in mind, then what I then have to do is motivate my people to achieve those business results. So we start from the desired business results and then we move towards some people management practices. Whereas there are a lot of HR or people management practices out there that say these are good practices. If you follow these practices, they will lead to the sort of business results that you might want. Now, this might look like the same point made from two different perspectives, but actually they're fundamentally different, these two approaches. And what we need to do is look at this in a bit more detail. So let's take the first option that suggests if you start with the business results that you want and you lead in a particular direction, so you set your performance standard, You then somehow try and motivate people to want to achieve that performance. And if you get that motivation and if you get the performance, then generally the organisation starts to perform well, and the people in the organisation feel part of a well-organised organisation, and morale tends to improve as well. Coming at this from the opposite angle, we take the view that HR or people management practices will lead in the other direction. And this time you start with the idea of trying to improve morale. So maybe you have things like an employee opinion survey, you have 360-degree feedback systems, you suggest to people you'll give them career development and training, and you hope that that will lead to them being motivated to actually eventually perform the way the organisation wants them to perform. Again, these are two fundamentally different views of people management. One starts with the business results and then works back to the people management practices, and the other starts with the people management practices and aims to try and get a performance out of the organisation. One of the most popular Harvard Business Review articles of the last 20 years was called Successful Change Programs Begin with Results by Robert Schaefer and Harvey Thompson. And they raised this question of, do you start with an activity and then hope that it gets results, or do you specify the sort of results you want and then keep those in your sights and then follow that with some activity? And here are a couple of the findings from their research. First is they say results-driven programs tend to bypass lengthy preparations and aim for quick, measurable gains within a few months. The whole idea here is until you actually start to show some results, to get some results, people don't actually jump on board with change initiatives. But then they say the momentum for activity-centred programs continues to accelerate even though there is virtually no evidence to justify the investment. Just the opposite. There is plenty of evidence that the rewards from these activities is illusory. So in other words, if you start with an activity in mind, let's send everybody on a training course on Six Sigma, the chances are that you won't get the results because actually nobody knows what they're meant to achieve on this training program anyway. And there are lots of other good reasons why people who don't know what results they're meant to achieve don't really get committed to the activity itself. It's a lesson I think we still have to learn nearly 20 years later.